Hello and welcome to this video on the Expert Sleeper's Cicely, which continues the 8 HP analogue range of modules and is based on a classic Roger Mayer Octavia Fuzz octave guitar pedal design. Let's see what this offers for Eurorack and how we can make the most of it. This video is sponsored by Expert Sleepers. Now Cicely is 8 HP, an all analogue design, and it's based on, as I said, that Roger Mayer classic Octavia fuzz pedal. This was used famously by Jimi Hendrix and many others over the years, and it gives an octave up effect as well as a fuzz effect. Now Cicely has a gain control with CV and attenuator, a center control, which wasn't present on any Octavia designs, and that also has a CV input and attenuator. We have 2 envelope follower outputs, both positive and negative variations. We then have a mix control, which has a CV, and there's jumpers on the back of the module to customize that mix curve and behavior. We have 2 inputs that sum together before this octave up fuzz effect, and then of course we have an output too. So let's dive into some patches, see how Cicely sounds and responds, and see how we can make the most of fuzz and octave up effects in general. So in this first patch, we'll look at the sound of Cicely and what it does to a static triangle wave. Have a basic drum beat, some reverb, and my little pattern coming through Cicely and a VCA. Now close off the VCA's envelope modulation, remove modulation, and we'll just listen to how this sounds. So with the mix all the way down, here's my input triangle waveform. This is the oscillator through Cicely and through a VCA that's currently fully open. Going fully wet, I have no modulation here, the attenuators are turned down. We can see how the gain gives this almost folding-like effect. Let's tune a little lower. There we go. And then the center control. Gives this really lovely bending, almost pulse width modulation type sound. Now I'll add a triangle LFO to the center here. Let's get our VCA modulating with a 16th note envelope. I'm going to add some modulation via sample and hold to the gain. Let's pull that mix back a little bit. Add in some more random sample and hold to the mix CV. Sequence to my oscillator. It gives a really interesting characterful sound. If I swap, say, that center control for another oscillator, rather than an LFO, you can blend in other waveforms nicely here. Removing that altogether for now, or even just blending in a second input here and have that on an attenuator. Have some higher tones there, some lower ones through a second oscillator in the center. Bit of reverb and drums back in. So here I'm using Cicely as an end of chain effect with a little splash of delay here from the disting. Now removing the delay. That's the output of Cicely. So it's a very basic saw wave into low pass filter patch, but just through 2 VCAs for a bit of extra dynamics. Now the filter is the Expert Sleeper's Ivo. We can make that a bit more quacky and acidic for now, say. And let's go fully wet. And embrace the fizzy, fuzzy goodness. And with that center control, you can really make that spitty. You can make it disappear, but it kind of crawls back from the dead. Be nice to get some more warmth and fundamental back into the sound. So by using the sine wave output of my oscillator, the same oscillator that is going through the filter with the saw wave that I'm using, I'm going to use that into the center as I blend that modulation up. We're adding in that fundamental, that lower tuning, that kind of warmth of the core tuning of the oscillator. Loads more bass back in. We can also modulate gain with that sine wave. Now I'm going to get rid of this quacky resonance and go to a duller, simpler sound from my filter here. We're then looking at the envelope output, and that's the envelope output of Cicely here, yellow trace, yellow cables. So I'm wanting to use this envelope, these dynamics, to modulate even further and get even more kind of wide response from Cicely. If I blend the mix back and patch that into the mix, it's going to push that mix further towards being fully wet, with the louder notes being even wetter, and the quieter notes not quite pushing round as far. And as I'm not one to kind of leave an input without at least trying some extra voltage or signal in there, I thought I'd try just mixing a DC voltage and offset voltage into the input to see what happens. So watch this light up and listen as I add some voltage. Gives a completely different response. So I thought, let's just throw an LFO in there. There's an LFO into the second input. This dynamic envelope that the module is following back into the mix. My main oscillator, just a single oscillator, has its saw wave through filters and VCAs to the input, with the sine wave outs are modulating the gain and the center. So here we're smashing sine waves with audio rate modulation, some heavy sidechain after Cicely. And some Electro-Tastic square wave overtones. And here's my sine wave playing my sequence. Going fully wet. Plenty of fuzz, saturation and colour as we've had so far. That's my main oscillator coming in here. The second oscillator is going to first modulate gain. Really lovely throaty audio rate modulation. And that same second oscillator, but instead of a sine wave modulating gain, I'm going to use a square wave to modulate center. We get some really nice kind of electro style overtones. Now 16th note envelope to mix. Let's add some ducking sidechain on a VCA again. Drums back in. play around with the rate of the audio rate modulation. So smashing a sine wave, using a second oscillator for audio rate modulation. So here I'm looking at Cicely in a feedback path around a delay. If I mute my dry sounds, you can hear in this snare, for example, we get this like a dirty, crunchy octave up effect. Now it takes quite a bit of utility to patch this kind of thing. Vortices is mixing all my dry sounds, including kick, snare, hi-hat, and this little melodic boop. Those sounds are being split with these Y-cable splitters, all being split into this mixer, this IntelliGel utility here, and this mixer feeds what actually goes into the delay. So rather than feeding my mix of, say, all the drums, I could just send a hi-hat, just the melodic pattern, just the kick, or snare. That comes into this VCA. And then I have another VCA channel. The mix out feeds the delay. I appreciate this is lots of mixing to follow. And without this channel turned on, we just get the delay pass through. Say just on the snare there. This controls feedback. And that's because the output of the delay is split in a mult, fed into Cicely, so this is where the feedback comes in, and fed back into this input mixer that actually feeds the delay. Dry sounds back in here. So with this all explained, let's just move into a more kind of ambient setting with a longer delay, but otherwise the patch will remain the same, just the input sound will change, and I'll lengthen the delay time. Here I'm using Cicely as an accent generator. Have a dry sound that's been split into the input and a less dense rhythm, this yellow envelope here, opening the gain on Cicely to give me an accent on top of my already existing patch. Now here's my existing patch, if you like, my dry sound in my mixer. And I'm using the top envelope there, just a 16th note triggered envelope, to control this VCA in a very basic oscillator into filter into VCA patch. Now I'm using a rhythmic sequence based on 16th notes but not playing all 16th notes to modulate the filter cutoff. And then cutting this down even further with an accent rhythm, just another gate sequence and another envelope here to control the gain on Cicely that takes all the sound you're currently listening to, pushes that gain up, and gives us an accent sound on top. Unmuting this in the mixer, and as we bring the gain up, we get these great crunchy little glitches on top of the sequence. Here it is on its own. Now I'm adding reverb to this sound to further emphasise this idea of it being an accent by adding some space to it. Bringing in the dry sound. And these are panned just slightly left and right, muting the reverb. Here's the dry sound fully left. Cicely now fully right. Both together. And then bringing the panning in, around 10 and 2, closer to centre. Reverb back in. So here I'm making a simple drone with a big reverb. Here it is just the reverb wet. Sine wave at the input. This sine wave is already fluctuating in level slightly. 3 LFOs to gain, center and mix. We can swap from a sine to, say, a triangle. We also get nice animation of a saw wave. We get some rather different and unique looking waveforms there. Let's add that reverb back in. So here we're looking at these envelope followers, both the positive and negative output, and affecting a filter playing a chord sound based on the drum sound that is the input to Cicely. Here are my drums, totally dry. These are the input to Cicely, and I'm adding a little bit of colour by just a tiny bit of wet being blended in from a more extreme octave up crunchy sound. So just a touch of colour there. I then have this chord sound in a filter. Lots of character on that filter. I'm going to use the positive envelope, green trace and green cables here to modulate the cutoff of that filter. So if I was to add a load of, say, 16th note bass drums, watch the green trace and listen, it's following that volume curve, that envelope of the drums that are at the input to Cicely. Now if I swap this to inverted modulation, negative envelope modulation, I'll first open up the cutoff and then add this negative voltage to duck the filter's cutoff. Kind of gives reverse-like sounds. And adding my drums back into the mix. Again, adding extra sounds here. Let's go back to positive modulation. And again, listen to how the drums change when I add some fills into my pattern, and how that changes this chord filter modulation. So here we're getting a little freaky with CV. So the input is this triangle modulation. The output, we can see the yellow trace off here. The blue line there is 0 volts, just to kind of set the scene for what the scope is doing. This is fully dry, so as I take it wet, we start to get these kinks in the waveform. And then we kind of, at this setting, get a fairly even but slightly more whippy, aggressive rise and falls that's an octave higher. As we change the gain settings, we get totally different responses and shapes, different levels too. Let's try that center control. becomes a really interesting CV mangler. Now if I patch in 3 slow triangle LFOs here to gain, centre and the mix, we shift through this whole world of mangled, kinked, kind of interesting, weird CV processing. This patch came from talking to Oz from Expert Sleepers. I was asking about his favourite ways of using Cicely and other distortions generally in his music, and I put a link in the description of him playing into a distortion giving this kind of effect. But one thing that Oz highlighted was, and I'll quote what he said in an email, "One thing I personally love doing with distortions is to have a delay or echo on the sound before going into the distortion. So when notes change, you get that temporary clanging sound as 2 sets of pitches battle it out." And that's exactly what's happening here. Now Cicely dry and no delay, which is the effects aid. A growly monophonic sound. Now by adding delay to it, so this is out of the filter VCA into the delay, into Cicely but it's fully dry. You can hear those moments of rubbing where those pitches are clashing and we get that kind of intense bits of kind of sound battling, if you like, between pitches. Now adding a load of distortion, which, if let's do it without the delay first, this just sounds great over this already growly patch. But get the delay involved. Thanks for watching this video on the Expert Sleepers Cicely. If you'd like to support me, gain access to exclusive store discounts, exclusive videos, PDF patch books, and the ever-growing DivKid community, head over to patreon.com/DivKid, where you can support for as little as $1 a month. Hit like, subscribe, leave any comments and questions, and I'll see you next time. Bye!